Evidence rooms aren't supposed to be exciting. By the time something reaches storage, the investigation is usually over. The case has been solved, the suspect has been arrested, or everyone has simply given up. That's what I believed when I accepted a temporary job in the evidence archives of the Ashcroft Police Department. The pay wasn't great. The hours were worse. Midnight until 8 every morning. My job was simple. Open old evidence boxes, scan their contents, enter everything into the department's digital records. Nothing left the room. Nothing was thrown away. Every item had to stay exactly where it had been logged. The officer training me repeated that rule at least 5 times. "You aren't here to solve cases," he smiled. "You're here to count things." For the first few nights, that's exactly what I did. Old wallets, knives, broken cell phones, stacks of photographs. Nothing interesting, nothing unusual, until my 4th shift. The evidence room was enormous. Rows of industrial shelving stretched farther than I could see. Each aisle was marked with faded yellow numbers. Most boxes hadn't been touched in decades. Some were covered in so much dust that I had to wipe the labels clean just to read them. Around 2:15 a.m., my scanner froze. The computer displayed an error. "Case not found." I frowned. That happened occasionally with very old evidence. I rebooted the system and scanned the barcode again. Same message. "Case not found." I looked down at the box. It was perfectly sealed. Brown cardboard, fresh packing tape, almost new. The evidence tag read, "Case 27-184, date. Entered, tomorrow." I stared at the label. Tomorrow's date, not today's. Tomorrow. Someone had entered evidence before the crime had happened. I carried the box to my supervisor's office. He didn't even look surprised. Instead, he quietly stood up, took the box from my hands, placed it back on the cart, then looked me directly in the eyes. "If you ever find another one," he paused, "don't read what's inside." I laughed. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. "You've seen one before?" I asked. He ignored the question. Instead, he unlocked a filing cabinet. Inside were dozens of identical evidence boxes, every one of them dated in the future, some by a day, some by weeks. One was dated almost 3 years from now. My mouth went dry. "What are these?" He slowly shut the drawer. "The reason nobody stays in this job very long." He sent me home early. I barely slept. The next night I came back determined to get answers. But the supervisor was gone. His office was empty. Another employee told me he'd retired. Retired? He'd been working 12 hours earlier. No farewell, no announcement. Just gone. His replacement introduced herself before my shift started. She handed me a new employee badge, then gave me exactly one instruction. "If you find another future box," she hesitated, "pretend you didn't." I asked the obvious question. "Why?" She looked toward the back of the evidence room, toward an aisle hidden in darkness, then answered so quietly I almost didn't hear her. "Because eventually, you'll find your own." The next 3 nights were painfully ordinary. No future boxes, no strange labels, no mysterious retirements, just endless shelves of forgotten evidence. Part of me started wondering if I'd imagined everything. Then, at exactly 2:47 a.m. on my 7th shift, the lights flickered. Not the whole building, only the evidence room. The fluorescent lights buzzed once, twice, then stabilized. My scanner immediately froze. Same error as before. "Case not found." I hadn't scanned anything. The barcode reader was sitting on the desk, yet somehow it had scanned something by itself. A location appeared on the screen. Aisle 19. I frowned. I wasn't anywhere near aisle 19. Curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my flashlight and started walking. The farther back I went, the older the shelves became. The labels changed. Modern printed barcodes disappeared. Everything became handwritten. Yellow folders, wooden crates, metal lockboxes. The air smelled different back here. Damp, cold, almost like a basement that hadn't been opened in years. Then I reached aisle 19. The lights above it were off. Every other aisle was illuminated. Only this one remained dark. At the entrance sat a small sign. It wasn't an evidence label. It was an old brass plaque bolted to the shelf. It simply read, "Archived pending events." Pending events? That wasn't police terminology. I stepped inside. The flashlight beam swept across hundreds of boxes. Everyone looked brand new. Everyone had tomorrow's date, or next week's, or next month's. Some had years I'd never even reached yet. My breathing became shallow. There were thousands of them. Entire shelves dedicated to crimes that hadn't happened. Accidents, disappearances, murders, missing persons, house fires. Every event carefully cataloged before it existed. Then my flashlight stopped on one box. Someone had written my name across the top. Not printed, handwritten, black marker. Michael Harper. My knees nearly gave out. I checked the date. 3 days from now. Before I could touch it, someone cleared their throat behind me. I spun around. An elderly man stood at the end of the aisle. Gray uniform, evidence technician badge. I'd never seen him before. "I wouldn't open that." His voice was calm, almost sympathetic. "Who are you?" "I've worked here a long time. Longer than anyone remembers." He walked toward me, slowly. He didn't seem surprised I was standing there, almost as if he'd expected me. "What is this place?" He glanced around the aisle. "The department calls it storage." He smiled faintly. "We call it the waiting room." "For what?" "The future." I laughed nervously. "That's impossible." He nodded. "It should be." Then he pointed toward the shelves. "Every box in this aisle will eventually be moved out there." He pointed toward the front of the evidence room. "When the date arrives." "So these are predictions?" He shook his head. "No. They're records." "Records of what?" "Things that have already happened." I stared at him. "They haven't happened." He looked at me with genuine pity. "Not to you." A loud metallic slam echoed through the room, somewhere farther down aisle 19. Another slam, then another. 3 heavy impacts. The old technician immediately went pale. "You stayed too long." "What?" He grabbed my arm. "We have to leave." "What was that?" He didn't answer. Instead, he shined his flashlight toward the far end of the aisle. There, between the shelves, stood a man wearing handcuffs. He wasn't moving. He simply stood there facing us. His police booking photograph hung around his neck. The same photo attached to the evidence box beside him. I looked down at the label. The booking date was tomorrow. The handcuffed man slowly lifted his head. Then, in a calm voice, he asked, "Have they filed me yet?" I couldn't answer him. I couldn't even breathe. The man stood perfectly still between the shelves, wrists cuffed in front of him, wearing an Orange County jail jumpsuit. Around his neck hung a laminated booking photograph. The same photograph attached to the evidence box. The old technician whispered, "Don't acknowledge him." "What?" "Whatever you do, don't answer his questions." The handcuffed man smiled. His eyes never blinked. "Have they filed me yet?" Silence. The technician tightened his grip on my arm. "We're leaving." He pulled me backward. The man didn't follow. He simply watched us retreat until the darkness swallowed him again. The moment we stepped out of aisle 19, the overhead lights flickered back on. Everything looked normal. Phones rang in distant offices. Printers hummed. Someone laughed down the hallway. The evidence room sounded alive again. The old technician released my arm. "You saw him?" It wasn't a question. I nodded. "What was he?" The technician looked toward aisle 19 before answering. "He hasn't arrived yet." "What does that mean?" "He'll be arrested tomorrow." I stared at him. "You mean?" "Yes. The man you saw is still living his normal life tonight." "So, who was standing in the aisle?" The technician sighed. "We stopped trying to answer that question decades ago." He led me into a break room that looked older than the rest of the building. The coffee maker had probably been there since the 1980s. He poured himself a cup but never drank it. Instead, he opened a battered notebook. Every page contained names, dates, case numbers. Some names were crossed out, others circled in red. "What is this?" "My replacements." I frowned. "Replacements?" He nodded. "Everyone who has ever worked aisle 19. I flipped through the pages. There were dozens, maybe hundreds. Each name had one thing in common. Every employment record ended suddenly. No resignation, no retirement, no explanation. Just gone. My stomach tightened. What happened to them? The old man slowly closed the notebook. "They found their box." Before I could ask another question, a radio on the wall crackled to life. Static. Then a dispatcher spoke. "All units respond." The address sounded familiar. Very familiar. Too familiar. It was mine. The technician looked at the clock. 2:58 a.m. Without saying a word, he walked toward the evidence room. I followed. "What are we doing?" "We're checking today's deliveries." We reached the intake table. A single cardboard box sat waiting. Fresh packing tape. Still unopened. Today's date. The technician read the label, then quietly turned it toward me. My blood ran cold. Recovered property location found 1438 Willow Lane. My house. Recovery time, tomorrow, 9:14 p.m. I looked inside the box. There was only one item, my apartment key, bent almost completely in half. Attached was a small evidence tag, collected after forced entry. I backed away. "No. This isn't funny." The technician remained silent. I grabbed the key. It was warm, not room temperature, warm, as if someone had been holding it only moments ago. I turned it over. There were scratches I recognized immediately. I had made them years earlier when I accidentally dropped the key on concrete. This wasn't a copy. It was mine. My actual house key. Tomorrow's house key. I looked back into the box. A second item rested beneath the paperwork. A cracked digital wristwatch. Mine. The display still worked. It flashed one time over and over. 9:14, the same time listed on the evidence tag. Then, the seconds began counting backward. 9:13:59, 9:13:58, 9:13:57. The technician slowly stepped away from the table. "You need to put those back." I couldn't move. The countdown continued. 9:13:44, 9:13:43. Then the lights went out. Every light in the evidence room. In the darkness, something heavy slid across the concrete floor. Not walking, dragging, getting closer. A voice echoed from somewhere inside aisle 19. Calm, patient, almost amused. "You've opened the wrong box." The emergency lights came on a second later. Dim red, barely bright enough to see. The room looked completely different. Long shadows stretched across the floor between the shelves. The intake table was empty. The evidence box was gone. So were my key and my watch. I spun toward the technician. He was staring into aisle 19, frozen. What was that? His voice was almost a whisper. It knows you opened it. What knows? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and handed me an old brass key attached to a faded tag. Archive gate. What's this for? If the lights go out again, run. The dragging sound returned, closer this time. Metal scraping against concrete, slow, deliberate. Whatever made the noise wasn't trying to hide. It wanted us to hear it coming. The technician grabbed a flashlight and aimed it down aisle 19. Nothing. Just shelves disappearing into darkness. Then, every evidence box on the left side of the aisle shifted at once. Not fell. Shifted. Each box slid forward exactly 1 inch. Thousands of cardboard boxes, moving together, without making a sound. I felt the hair stand up on my arms. What just happened? The technician swallowed. It reorganizes. What reorganizes? The future. One box slowly slid off a shelf. It landed upright on the floor. No one touched it. The label faced us. I couldn't stop myself from reading it. Case 3, 1-402. Date entered, tonight, recovery time, 3:08 a.m. I checked my watch, 3:06. The technician stepped between me and the box. Don't. It's evidence. It isn't evidence yet. The box suddenly burst open, not violently. The tape simply peeled itself away. Inside lay a police radio. Its speaker crackled immediately. A frightened officer shouted, "Officer down!" Gunfire echoed in the background. Someone screamed. Another voice yelled, "We've got one suspect fleeing through the archives." The transmission dissolved into static, then silence. I looked at the technician. He looked terrified. That radio hasn't been found yet. A loud crash echoed somewhere in the building. This time it wasn't coming from aisle 19. It came from upstairs, the active police station. Footsteps thundered overhead. Real ones. Officers running. The technician looked toward the ceiling. It started. What started? The investigation. My stomach dropped. The radio. He nodded. They're living it right now. Another evidence box slid from a shelf, then another. Then another. Each landed perfectly upright. Each bore today's date. Each slowly opened on its own. Inside one was a blood-stained wallet. Inside another, a shattered pair of eyeglasses, a service pistol, a torn jacket, broken handcuffs. Every item looked as though it had just been collected, fresh, almost warm. The radio inside the first box came alive again. Suspect entered the evidence archives. I heard footsteps, heavy boots descending the stairwell. The technician grabbed my shoulder. They're coming. The officers? He shook his head. No. The evidence. The dragging sound was almost beside us now. Something rounded the corner at the end of aisle 19. At first, I thought it was a person crawling. Then I realized why it looked wrong. It wasn't crawling. It was walking. But every movement happened backward. Its feet lifted before they touched the floor. Its head turned before its shoulders. Its clothes pulled themselves clean instead of becoming dirty. Its bloody shirt slowly became white. The bullet holes in its chest closed one by one. Every step reversed time. It wasn't approaching the crime. It was leaving it, walking backward toward the moment it was still alive. It stopped 20 feet away, then slowly raised one finger, pointing, not at me, at the shelf behind me. I turned. There, resting alone at eye level, was another evidence box. This one wasn't dated tomorrow. It wasn't dated next year. It simply read, "Final inventory contents. 1 employee." I stared at the label. Final inventory contents. 1 employee. No case number. No evidence tag. No date. Just those 2 words. The technician slowly closed his eyes. "I was hoping you'd never see that one." "You've seen it before?" He nodded. "Once." "What happened?" "It had someone else's name." I looked closer. Beneath the printed label, someone had written a name in black marker. Michael Harper. My name, again. The radio transmissions above us became louder. Officers were now inside the archives. I could hear them shouting, "Check every aisle. Watch your corners. The suspect is armed." The technician grabbed the box before I could touch it. "We have to put this back." "Why?" "Because once it's opened." He stopped. His expression changed. "The inventory begins." "What inventory?" He didn't answer. Instead, he shoved the box back onto the shelf. The moment it touched the metal, every light in aisle 19 went out. The darkness wasn't complete. Hundreds of tiny red evidence tags began glowing between the shelves. Thousands of them, each attached to a different box, each floating like tiny eyes. Then they started moving. Not the boxes, the tags, as though invisible hands were carrying them through the darkness. One by one, they drifted toward us. The technician whispered, "Don't let one touch you." I almost laughed. Then the first tag brushed against my sleeve. Instantly, my vision changed. I wasn't standing in the archives anymore. I was standing in my apartment. The clock on the microwave read, 9:13 p.m. tomorrow. Exactly the time from the evidence tag. Someone was pounding on my front door, hard. "Police! Open the door!" I looked down. There was blood on my hands, not a little, enough to drip onto the floor. I stumbled backward. The pounding continued. Then, the front door exploded inward. Officers rushed inside, weapons drawn. One of them shouted, "Don't move!" I raised my hands. "I didn't." Gunfire. Everything went black. I gasped. The archive room snapped back into view. I was on my knees. The technician was shaking my shoulders. "You saw it." "What?" My voice barely worked. "I was in my apartment." He helped me stand. "That's not necessarily what happens." It felt real. It always does. I stared at him. Was it the future? He hesitated. Finally, "I don't know." The dragging sound returned. Only now. It surrounded us. From every aisle, every direction. Hundreds of slow, scraping noises. The technician's face turned pale. "They're all moving." "What is?" "The archived." My stomach tightened. "The people?" He nodded. "The ones whose cases are complete." Every evidence shelf began rattling. Boxes shifted. Tape peeled away. Cardboard lids slowly opened. The radios inside several boxes all switched on at once. Different voices, different years, different crimes. "We found another body." "Shots fired." "Missing child located." "Dispatch. Officer needs immediate assistance." Dozens of investigations, decades apart, all playing simultaneously. Then every radio stopped. At the exact same moment, a single voice spoke through all of them. Calm, deep, almost impossible to place. Inventory discrepancy detected. The technician looked absolutely terrified. It spoke again. "One item," a long pause, "is misplaced." Every flashlight in the room turned toward me, not by human hands, on their own. Their beams locked onto my chest. The voice finished. "Please return yourself." "To storage." I couldn't move. Every flashlight in the archive room remained fixed on me. Their beams were perfectly steady. No one was holding them. The technician slowly backed away. "I'm sorry." I looked at him. "What?" They've chosen. You can help me." His eyes filled with genuine regret. "I can't." "Why not?" "Because I already escaped once." The voice echoed again, not through the radios this time, through the shelves themselves. Every metal rack vibrated as it spoke. Inventory must balance. One evidence box slid off a shelf, then another, then 20 more. Hundreds of boxes hit the floor without bursting open. Instead, they arranged themselves into a straight line, like a pathway, leading deeper into aisle 19. The technician lowered his head. "I've never seen it do this." "What is it?" He answered without looking up. "The archive." "That's not an answer. It's the only one we've got." The radios all clicked on again. This time they weren't playing old dispatch recordings. They were playing interviews, witness statements, one voice after another. I saw him leave the building. He looked confused. He kept asking where everyone had gone. "I never saw him again," the technician whispered. "Listen to the names." The next interview began. "My name is Daniel Brooks." The technician flinched. "That was the man before me." Another recording. "My name is Susan Miller. I worked evidence for 11 years. I found a box with my name." The voices continued. Dozens of them. Every missing employee from the notebook. Everyone telling the same story. Until the recordings all ended with silence. Not static. Silence. As if the speaker had simply ceased to exist. The path of evidence boxes stretched farther into the darkness. At the end stood a door. I'd never seen it before. Heavy steel. No handle. Only a brass plaque. "Master Inventory." The technician looked horrified. "It shouldn't be here." "You've never seen it?" He slowly shook his head. "No employee has." The voice returned, calm, patient. "Please complete processing." The steel door unlocked by itself, with a slow, heavy click. Inside wasn't another room. It was impossible. Rows of shelves stretched farther than I could see. Not hundreds, millions. Every shelf perfectly organized, every box identical, every label handwritten. The ceiling disappeared into darkness. The room was impossibly large, larger than the police station, larger than the city. The air smelled like old paper and seawater. My stomach tightened. I'd smelled that before, at the aquarium, the same cold, salty, ancient smell. For just a second, I thought I heard it. 3 slow knocks, far away, as though they echoed through the shelves. Then they were gone. I stepped inside, against every instinct I had. The technician shouted behind me, "Don't cross the threshold!" Too late. The moment both feet entered the room, the steel door slammed shut, every shelf illuminated at once. Millions of tiny white labels, millions of names, some famous, some ordinary, some dates centuries old, others centuries in the future. One shelf stood directly ahead. Only one box rested on it. Fresh tape, fresh handwriting. I already knew whose name I'd find. I walked closer anyway. Michael Harper. Date archived. Tomorrow. Time, 9:14 p.m. Status, awaiting collection. Before I could step back, the box spoke, in my own voice. "Open me. Open me." My own voice echoed from inside the box. Not a recording, not a speaker. It sounded exactly as if I were standing inside the cardboard. I took a step backward. The box moved with me. It never left the shelf, but somehow, it stayed the same distance away. The room around me seemed to stretch. Every aisle became longer, every shelf farther apart. The archive wasn't changing. It was rearranging itself around me. Then the box spoke again. "You're making this harder than everyone else did." I forced myself to ask the question that had haunted me since my first night. What is this place? Silence. Then, every box in the room answered at once. We remember. The sound rolled through the endless shelves like thunder. Millions of voices, perfectly synchronized. We remember everything. I felt my knees weaken. Every crime, every victim, every suspect, every choice. The voices softened. But memories must be stored. I looked around. Every box, every label, every name. None of them were evidence. They were people, or what remained of them. The cardboard lid slowly folded open by itself. Inside wasn't a body. There was only a single folder. On the tab was written, "Life Summary with Shaking Hands." I opened it. The first page was my birth certificate. The next, my first report card. Family photographs I'd never given anyone. Medical records, traffic tickets, journal entries I had never shown another person. Every moment of my life, perfectly documented. The final page hadn't been completed. Only one sentence appeared. Collection scheduled upon conclusion of final event. Below it, blank space. Waiting. A loud knock echoed through the room, not from a door, from somewhere impossibly far away. Then another, then a third. 3 slow knocks. The shelves trembled. The archive fell silent. Every voice stopped. For the first time, it sounded afraid. The lights flickered. Somewhere in the darkness, something much larger than the archive had arrived. The same cold, saltwater smell flooded the room. I heard water dripping, then waves. Impossible. There was no ocean for hundreds of miles. The knocking came again, closer. The steel shelves bent slightly inward, as if enormous pressure surrounded the building. The archive whispered, "It found us." The cardboard box slammed shut. Every light turned red. The endless shelves began collapsing one after another, not falling, disappearing, as if they had never existed. The brass door burst open. The technician stood outside. "Run!" I didn't hesitate. I sprinted toward him. Behind me, something moved between the disappearing shelves. I caught only a glimpse. An eye, enormous, watching. The same impossible feeling I'd experienced looking into Tank 32. Too vast for my mind to understand. I looked away immediately. The technician grabbed my arm and pulled me through the doorway. The instant we crossed the threshold, the archive vanished. The steel door became an ordinary concrete wall. There had never been a room there. I never went back. Officially, I resigned the next morning. Unofficially, the police department told everyone the evidence archives were being renovated. 6 months later, the entire building was demolished. They said the foundation had become unstable. No new evidence facility was ever built. Instead, the department began outsourcing evidence storage to another county. No explanation was ever given. Last week, I was cleaning out an old filing cabinet in my apartment, tucked inside a folder of utility bills. I found a property receipt. It wasn't mine. The date at the top caught my attention. Tomorrow, item collected, 1 brass key, recovery location, apartment of Michael Harper. I checked every drawer, every cabinet, every pocket. I don't own a brass key, never have. But taped to the back of the receipt was a handwritten note. Just 4 words. Inventory is almost balanced. Sometimes when I'm lying awake after midnight, I hear a cardboard box slide across a floor that isn't there. Slowly, patiently, getting closer each night, waiting for someone to file the last piece of evidence. Me.